Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming. This is the Planning Board meeting of December 12th of 2022. The only item on our agenda tonight is the 299 Salem Street, the Glover property. So I thank the team here from LEGGAT. Thad, thank you very much for being here. And this is our first in-person meeting, if you will, it's actually a hybrid, so it's accessible on Zoom as well. We felt it was important to meet in person to kind of have a bit of a more hands-on approach to kind of looking at some of the issues here, especially what we would consider probably the most important outstanding issue right now, which is traffic and circulation. And so we can just sort of really kind of chisel down at those details and know what we can do and how we can make things better right now. Hi, Bill. So I thought what we might want to do is kind of update where we are right now. And in terms of all we have the latest site plan, which I thank you for delivering to us, is dated December 5th. Mm-hmm. The complete set of plans, big 24 by 17s who are available at Town Hall. You also have a smaller copy in front of you. In here, I think we have, well, I'm assuming that the smaller set is the same as the full set.
Yes.
In terms of all the information. We have gotten quite a few comments from some neighbors, abutters, and so forth, and a lot of that does concern traffic. We can get into that a little more later. We've had the initial full traffic report that was presented to us by LEGGAT. We've had a peer review of traffic report, and we also were referred to a report that was done back in 2016 for the Vinnin Square area that was part of a study that was done by the Boston Regional Metropolitan Planning Organization, which really addresses the overwhelming circulation issues at Vinnin Square in general, and of course includes this particular site. So that's probably one of the most important aspects that I'd like to discuss about the traffic here, is that even though clearly we're discussing your site, there are two properties here, essentially we're treating as one. It does sit in 3 different towns, well, two towns and 1 city. And even though a very small slice is in Salem, the Salem piece is very important because it affects the transportation network. And it also affects the sewage and drainage, as all the drainage is leaving the site and going through Salem. And it also is hard to look at this kind of as an isolated spot when it's in the midst of a kind of a large traffic network. So we've got, Paradise Road and running through Swampscott into Salem. We've got Essex Street crossing, Tedesco Road, Vinnin Street. There are, the various kind of cut-throughs, Sunbeam Road going into Vinnin Square. We've got Salem Street. So there's a lot of what we have to talk about here, and what's going to happen here beyond simply the numbers that we're looking at on the traffic reports are impacts from all the other activity around it. So that's kind of some of the stuff I'd like to address. I don't know if do you want to begin first is there anything that you want to, why don't you go ahead, Thad, and update me, and then we can kind of move into some of the issues that we had about traffic.
Yeah, good evening, Thad Simasco, SV Design. Bill Gauze is here from LEGGAT. Sam Cole is on the call from LEGGAT. Steve Moderano, you see right there, is our civil. I think that Paul Feldman, our counsel, is going to join us if he hasn't already. And we thought to start first. We'll give you an update on all of the aspects of the project, from sustainability and fire and historical. But we thought, since Jeff is here and ready, he's the traffic consultant.
Great.
He, and perhaps with some assistance from Steve, can walk you through the traffic peer review, and we start with that, and then after that I can we'll probably do civil, landscape, and then I can talk through a little bit of the architecture. Basically, I just want to outline what changes have been made
That would be great.
in this latest set that got filed from what was done originally. Well, you know,
Okay.
you've seen most of it, but we'll show you and point out the highlights if that's okay with you.
That sounds good.
So Jeff, I think if you're ready, you can talk through the peer review. You're back and forth on the peer review on traffic.
Sure, and thank you. Good evening, Madam Chairman, members of the board. For the record, Jeffrey Durham, Vanessa Associates. I think the chair had probably a pretty good overview relative to where we are in traffic in terms of our presentations to the board. So we've made a full traffic presentation to you of our traffic study and the findings of that assessment. The board, as well as the town of Marblehead, as well retained an independent third-party peer review consultant to check the facts and findings of our traffic study. And I think just kind of as the outset of, before I get into kind of what we responded to in terms of comments, I think it's very important for the board and the public to understand that when we conduct a transportation analysis, there is a series of standards that we're required to follow. They're set by the Massachusetts Department of Transportation. Me as a professional engineer with over 30 years of experience, I'm required to follow those standards of stamp the traffic study and certify that it complies with all of the required standards, not only of Mass DOT, but of the traffic engineering and transportation planning professions. The first role of your peer reviewer is to, in fact, make sure that that's the case. And that is probably the first thing that they do. And they did certify that. In fact, they certified not only the methodology, but also the findings of the traffic study, as well as, I think, as we hope with all peer reviewers, is at the end of the process is to result in a project that's better at the end of the process in terms of the peer review than when it was first before you. And really what you'll see in terms of the last peer review letter is that we've in fact achieved that in terms of the project, as well as some improvements that we'll talk about in a minute for the project that get to the point of what the chair had mentioned, which is not only just looking at the impacts of this project, but of the careful dynamic of traffic that happens in the area, and the relationship between each of the intersections and how it conveys traffic through the area. Because there's as the board's well aware, they are very closely related. Failure of one intersection kind of reverberates into other intersections. In terms of the kind of the high level additional work that we've done with the peer review consultants is, as the chair mentioned, there was a previous study done in the Vinnin Square area by the Central Transportation Planning staff that looked at the area as a whole, planned future growth, existing conditions in terms of the way that the intersections operate, and developing some strategies for improvements to the square and to each of the intersections. As a part of the peer review comments, one of the things that was discussed in there was to try to take some relationship of our traffic counts to the traffic counts that were used in that study, and in particular as it relates to the impacts of COVID. And so that analysis was undertaken. Some additional adjustments were done to increase the traffic volumes that we had used in our traffic study. We've rerun the analysis for the project, and as a result of that, using higher traffic volumes at each of the intersections, what we found was basically the results were similar to our original traffic study, which is that the project, which is expected to produce somewhere between 40 and 50 peak hour trips, did not result in a significant impact on intersection operations. And when we're talking about significance, there's two things we're looking at. It's increasing motorist delays at any of the intersections that make up Vinnin Square. And we're also looking at queuing at intersections. So when we're talking about significance, in this case, delays did not increase by more than 10 seconds for any movement at an intersection, and vehicle queues didn't increase by any more than 2 to 3 vehicles. I really think that queuing is probably the more important parameter in this area because of the fact that we've got very closely spaced intersections. And so as we looked at mitigation measures associated with the project, I think that or others may show some of the plans later on in the presentation to talk about what we're doing for mobility improvements, as well as some signal timing improvements. The signal timing improvements are really made to not only address the impacts of this project so that things would be better or no harm condition with the improvements we're planning to do, but we're actually hoping for a betterment here. So that's kind of the first step of improvements that we're planning to do, is to retime the traffic signals and the coordination of the traffic signals, so how they convey traffic from one intersection to the other intersection. to do two things. As I said, offset the impact of the project, but I think importantly is to not have queuing back through intersections. So there's specific things that we be undertaken as they relate to the timing of the traffic signals so that we don't have traffic backing up through intersections. And we've proven that out through some analysis that we provided to your peer reviewer, and they've agreed that that will in fact mitigate the impact of the project and hopefully result in a betterment, which was what the Central Transportation Planning staff was looking at as they looked at the Vinnin Square area as a whole for improvement. So we're going to be implementing some of those measures.
Good.
The other improvements that we're doing is we termed as mobility and safety improvements in the area. As you might remember from the earlier presentation, we have the benefit of two bus routes that run past the project site. One on Salem Street and one on Vinnin Street. They're certainly within walking distance of the site. We have one right at the project site. And the ability to get to that bus stop, as we mentioned, there's a stop directly opposite. There's a stop at the site on Salem Street if you're heading towards Vinnin Square, and then the other stop is opposite the site at Sunbeam Lane. And so one of the improvements that we're doing is we're actually moving the crosswalk that currently exists on the south leg of Salem Street and Sunbeam Street to the north leg, and then restriping that crosswalk and the crosswalk across Sunbeam Lane. And then we're rebuilding the wheelchair ramps at that intersection and installing some upgraded signs and markings there as well. So there will be high visibility crosswalk markings in both instances, that location. It's a safer crossing, it's a more logical crossing, and it provides that benefit for us to provide the direct linkage to public transportation services. Now, just to the north of the site, Salem and Vinnin Street, that's kind of the crux, as everyone's kind of pointed out, is that we have two driveways. That intersection is the concentration point for traffic associated with the project. So we are making some significant improvements at that intersection. Not only the retiming I had mentioned and the coordination of that traffic signal with the Paradise Road intersection, we're also have mobility and safety improvements at that intersection. So in the case of the project, what we're going to be doing is making sure that there's crossings actually across all three legs of that intersection, or the fourth leg if you consider the driveway to the shopping center. So there'll be the ability for pedestrians to cross all of those legs, new crosswalks, new wheelchair ramps there. We're also replacing all of the pedestrian push buttons and signal indications at that intersection as well for pedestrians. So it's a full upgrading of the pedestrian accommodations, all ADA compliant, as will be the sidewalks along the frontage of the project. And then there will be that new crosswalk across the Vinnin Street east leg of the intersection. That is not there today, and that's the most direct crossing associated with the project. And as you might remember, our internal pathway network leads to that intersection and provides a direct connection to that crossing. So if you do want to walk from our site to get over to the shopping center, it's just one crossing that you'll need to make rather than making a crossing of Salem Street and then across Vinnin Street to get over to the plaza. So it simplifies that crossing. It's a much safer crossing. And then, as I mentioned, we're upgrading the wheelchair ramps at that intersection.
That's a change from last time, right? Like last time we had talked, there wasn't going to be an a crosswalk at that exit from the property straight across to the shopping center.
That's correct. Yeah, it's a significant change from the standpoint of pedestrian safety at the intersection there. So thank you for putting this up. And my description might not be as good as the plan, obviously, was showing it. But yes, that is a change, as well as adding sidewalk segments and wheelchair ramps at that location. And it provides that direct connection that we talked about because, it did make sense. Obviously, pedestrian exposure and safety, if we can just minimize the amount of times that the road needs to be crossed, it's a safer condition. This certainly provides that as well. So that's the essence of what, as a result of the peer review, again, they checked the facts and findings of the traffic study, agreed in terms of the impacts of the project, agreed as it relates to mitigation measures associated with the project, and the central pieces of it are what you see here. And I also want to mention that there's a follow-on mitigation that goes after the project is constructed. There's also a retiming and optimization of those traffic signals I had mentioned. So it's not just working the signals as they exist prior to the project being occupied, but it's after the project is occupied, going back out there and doing a similar adjustment so that we're making sure that to the extent the traffic patterns in the area are different than when we originally had done our assessment, that we're accounting for that and readjusting the signals so that, again, we don't have issues where we have traffic backing up through the intersection. So that's a high-level overview, and hopefully that I covered everything that you wanted, but that's kind of where we are on the peer review. You should have a letter that basically confirms what I said to you tonight. Also making some recommendations that these improvements that I've described are conditions of the approval of the project.
Thank you. So, any comments? So what I see here is that what we had talked about, specifically if I move over to Vinnin Street, Salem Street intersection, and that light, which is kind of at the very, I don't know what direction, the north corner, the northwest corner of the property, that has just been traditionally, a problematic intersection. And as you mentioned, the Paradise Road, Vinnin Street intersection is maybe, 6 or 7 car lengths away. So traffic backs up all the time because of people that want to turn left and then they can't get into the left lane, so they try to go to the right and they can't go to the right. And then people in the right lane are turning right to go to Marblehead or trying to cut through the Staples parking lot. And I do note here that you moved the crosswalks up closer to the actual, and instead of making them, at the narrower part of the road, now they've moved up to, it's a longer crosswalk, but it's actually a more realistic crosswalk in terms of where people are actually going to cross. And I know this came up at our last meeting, and I, like most of us, go through this intersection all the time and notice that, there was, with the old crosswalk, there isn't, not one car stops before it, so it doesn't, it's not really working as a crosswalk right now. So that, just moving it up, it would certainly be helpful. All in all, I just think that light has been problematic. And you mentioned something about, timing, the timing of the light, signal delays, and let's see, no, you mentioned like the timing of the light, and then and reducing queuing there. So what kind of timing would actually improve that situation? So in other words, if right now they're timed for like 2 minutes or something, what would you do? Would you make it a shorter time or a longer time, or what? I mean, it can only go one way or the other, right? So
Right.
What actually happens?
So it could be either one of those things. What the key thing here really is that the traffic signals, they have sensors. Those sensors may or may not be working, but the way the sensors work is it's letting the traffic signal know not only that there's a vehicle trying to get through the intersection, so it's a red light, it tells the traffic signal there's somebody waiting for a green light. Once the light turns green, the other thing that these sensors do is it tells the traffic signal how many cars are passing over that sensor into the intersection. The balancing of retiming of traffic signals when you've got closely spaced intersections is to, that second part of what the sensor does is, as it counts cars going from one intersection to the next intersection, the delicate balance that you want to have when you have closely spaced intersections is that if traffic, let's say, is going straight through on Vinnin Street to Paradise Road, if the Paradise Road traffic signal turns red, the sensor on Vinnin Street, you want to make sure that it shuts off the traffic on Vinnin Street at a point where no more cars are introduced between the two intersections that can physically fit. And so that's the dynamic that you need to, it could be a combination of increasing the amount of time or decreasing the amount of time, depending on the time of day. But the key thing is when you have closely spaced intersections, to make sure you never introduce more traffic between the intersections that can physically fit. So the sensors allow us to do that. So we can have the sensor tell us, like you said, if there's only room to fit 5 to 7 cars, or 7 cars, let's say, between Paradise and Salem Street, then we shut the signal down at the Salem Street, Vinnin Street intersection at a point where no more than 5 to 7 cars pass that sensor. And then the light can turn red at Paradise. And so the retiming really achieves that balance. And so we will be, as we update that traffic signal, is number one, making sure everything's working properly. That's always done. Number two, making the upgrades that we had said to the pedestrian accommodations. And then lastly is retiming that traffic signal after we ensure everything's working, so that we achieve that balance. No more cars introduced between the two intersections than can physically fit when there's a red light, let's say at Paradise Road. So that's the balance that we do with the retiming of the signals.
The synchronization between the two seems to be incredibly important, because what I see all the time is that the cars are lined up down Vinnin Street. The light at Salem Street turns green, but the light at Paradise Road is still red. And it basically goes through the whole cycle. And so the Salem Street light is green, nobody moves, and then the Salem Street light turns red, and the Paradise Road light turns green. And so maybe those couple of cars that were stuck in the in-between get to go, but you go through cycles and cycles where you're sitting stuck at a green light because the light 20 feet ahead of you at Paradise is red. So that synchronization between those two, and I don't know if the sensor piece that you just spoke to really gets to it, but like making sure that they're synchronized with each other to avoid the situation we currently have, I think is the most important piece.
Yeah, that shouldn't be happening. What you described is a symptom of a system that's not working properly. It should not be operating like that. And that is a reason. It's really could be a condition upon improper timing of the traffic signals and coordination. It could also be that the system is the sensors I described. If those are not working properly, that can also happen, because then what happens is it operates as a time clock without any intelligence that's actually built into those signals. So that it's a symptom of both of those, and so we will be addressing both of those as a part of this project.
Yeah, you spoke about betterments before. That would be a betterment if we can, even with whatever increased traffic comes from this project, if we can figure out a way to time these lights right so that there's not the gridlock that we currently have, that would be an improvement.
Yeah, that shouldn't be happening. That means something is not working properly, because the equipment is able to shouldn't be doing what you described. The equipment is able to do what I described. So either something's not working properly or the timing is not set correctly.
All right, so I have just a thought, and I'm going to draw it over here on the board because I don't know how else to do it. I don't know if you can see. You probably can. Okay, so I'm not a traffic engineer. I never studied traffic engineering. I'm a driver, and I've been driving along here for a long time. So this is the site. This is the little thing, the nice little thing. This is over here is that's the gas station. This is Walgreens. Okay, you get the picture, and this is Sunbeam Lane. Okay, so just you know what I'm talking about. So this is Vinnin Street. So this is the site. The Swampscott Marblehead. Okay, so here is problematic light number 1. Then we go over here, and problematic light number 2. So what would it look like if we did one of those nice rotaries, which would have to go into the parking lot, I think, of the massively unused Staples parking lot, which is always empty. So say you had something like this. And then what happens is that people would go around, and you could go to the right, and then that would be the first little outing, and then you could go straight, and then you go around and go this way. And then you have more of an easy flow, and without this being totally jammed up. I've just seen this work in a couple of really tight spots, and I'm sure you're aware of them. One is on Danvers Road, some people call it Swampscott Road, Danvers Road, coming out of the Home Depot, and others. And the other one is up in downtown Salem, sort of by Essex Street and whatever that, and Chestnut, I guess it is, that comes out there. That used to be a hellish intersection. Now, in the one in Salem, has a traffic light only a few car lengths up. So that was always a problem too. So, but that has, it's still going to be, there's still going to be a lot of cars. So this is the thing, that we're not going to get rid of cars. It's going to happen. I mean, they're going to be there. There's more units going in. If the traffic report shows, 5 cars an hour or 7 cars an hour, the cars are going to be there. So it's a matter of, are there ways of moving them a little more easily. And I think that's kind of what the deal is in Salem. If you looked at what happened there, for example, it's still crowded, but it moves. It's just a different flow. It moves better than it did, and it's kind of an indisputable fact. So I'm just throwing it out there. Is it something that, no, obviously that most of that land's in Salem, so that's something that they do, they are involved in this project. They do have an interest in part of this property, and, they're, from a utility standpoint, they're very much involved in this project. And from a standpoint of contribution to the traffic, they just built another building literally on our town line that hasn't even opened yet. As you know, that residential building that's just beyond where the old Starbucks used to be. It's on Essex Street. I don't even know how many units are in there, but that hasn't even opened yet. So that's going to, get moving too. And there's constantly going to be something else that's going to be more flow. So how do we look at this, like, how do we make it better from the car standpoint, where we just understand, like, how people drive, how they move, where they're going. We've got, and we know this. We've been looking at this for a couple of months now. So people coming out of this exit, out of the Marblehead exit, most of them are going to turn left. I know there was conversation about no left turn there. I mean, they're going to turn left. I mean, they just are. I mean, that they're going to go to Vinnin Square. I mean, and most of the people coming out of the Swampscott exit, some of them very well might go straight, and that could be because they don't want to get in line at Salem Street, so they'll cut through the free-for-all parking lot, and they'll find their way out, through there. But some people are also going to, most people will turn right. If they're going to Boston, maybe they're going to, shoot down Salem Street and go the other way. Who knows? But there, you'd have a pretty good mix. So, how do we? I wonder if, different kinds of solutions like that. And I'm no engineer. If it's worth considering, because does it start to change behavior in a way which is something, can we try to change behavior? That I want to put out there, because I think if it were something that the engineers even think is worth thinking about, then, we could make an effort to have more discussions, set up the kind of collaboration we would need to with our town departments in Salem, obviously, and pursue that discussion. Other issues that are going to have a tremendous impact is just the pedestrian access. So I think the crosswalk improvements, that would be something else that we could, if something like a roundabout was used, then that changes with the crosswalk scope, but that's okay, because you can have shorter crosswalks because you don't have a light. So you can actually pull the crosswalk away from the intersection and have it at the shorter part of the street, because now you don't have a light, and so people can actually have a safer crossing at the shorter part of the sidewalk. So I'm trying to think, all of this is going to happen together. All the people, all the bikes, all the crossing, all these cars, it's just trying to change behavior. So I'm thinking that might be something to consider. And then I have other suggestions, but that's a big one, and I just wanted to put it out there and see if it's worth talking about or having this discussion.
I thought you were crazy when you first started talking, but when you mentioned the two examples in Salem that have worked, you are right, especially the one in downtown Salem. Just anecdotally, I drove through downtown Salem like October 30th and thought it was going to be a disaster, and went through that roundabout, and
it works. I know.
It works,
it's amazing.
Surprisingly. I don't know how, because
I don't know how
everybody
either.
should crash into each other, but
I just think it's
works.
a behavior change. It just is. And the crossing works better too. People can cross there, and and I try to think, why would it make it easier to cross? And then I realize it's because the crosswalk you're not trying to get it at the crossing points of the intersection. You can pull it further back, and it's not associated with a light. So it's just different approach. So, I'd like to at least have more discussion about it and see if it's
Jeff,
something.
any thoughts?
Is this my client asking?
Yes.
So the improvements that you're talking about are generally regional planning level improvements.
Well, we tried a lot of times.
Yeah. So, and so, you know, and Dad, I can see you, so you can put some facial expressions to this. I mean, that type of an improvement there is, it's over $1 million, north of $1 million to build that. It's certainly not something that's within the scope and scale of this project. The benefits you described are 100% correct in what others have observed. If you have the land area to build it, and you can fit, and I think everyone, you know, the Salem one might be a good example. The circle has to accommodate tractor trailers and buses going around, so the circle ends up being, you know, something that's, I think, larger than what you might think that it may be. And so typically, it requires a lot of land, I think is the first thing. But it does achieve the benefits you described. I mean, it shortens pedestrian crossing distances. It certainly is a safer design because you've eliminated crossing conflicts. You know, as you drive through the center of that circle, no one's really interacting with each other except within the circle itself. And then pedestrians have short crossing distances. They also have the benefit of being able to cross in 2 stages because typically the crosswalks are to an island area. So you can cross halfway and then wait and then cross the other way. And traffic moves slower. I mean, so there is a lot of advantages. The disadvantages obviously are it requires a significant amount of land. So the footprint of the circle would be much larger than the intersection that exists there today. And then, of course, it's extremely costly.
Well, there is a lot of unused or underutilized, I should say, land in Salem in that parking lot. So I think there may be some collaborative efforts. I mean, I think if we, and I wasn't insinuating that you, well, I mean, I'd like you to participate in, you know, whatever. I mean, there are going to be some kind of, you know, improvements, sidewalk improvements, crosswalk improvements, those kinds of things. So there is some involvement here. I was not making the assumption that Leggett was going to, you know, get into the roundabout business and, you know, go out there and do this. But if you are willing to consider this, I would certainly pull the parties together that would need to talk about this pretty quickly. We have contacts in Salem. We have, I think we could get significant support in the town to do this. And we have MassDOT currently working on Paradise Road. These requests and that were sent to MassDOT years ago. We've been trying to follow up on this. I mean, I think there's we could get a lot of public will behind it. So this could be something that wouldn't have to hold up the project, but could be, you know, considered as an important part. I just want to bring up again that, you know, we have a group of neighbors that have been attending many of these meetings or several, I mean, all of these meetings so far. This is our 3rd, so, who have put together a petition, and I don't know if that was shared with you, but, okay, so you saw it. So, and the petition is to redo the traffic study with the notion that, you know, it was just done during COVID and the numbers aren't right. So I completely understand that, and there's a general lack of comfort with, oh my God, there's going to be, you know, all these extra cars and oh no, and, you know, how are we going to handle it? And it's just, you know, and I understand that completely. I think that, and when I spoke to one of the residents who was involved in this, my question was, so I think their concern is absolutely legitimate. My question about requesting the study was, you know, what do you want to know? I mean, what's the goal? Is the goal to, you know, just find out if indeed that number's bigger, which we can, you know, safely assume is probably true, or, you know, I think one of the big concerns is that the project was too big. So my explanation was that this was the agreement that the town of Swampscott and the Athanas family, the town of Swampscott agreed to 96 units in our zoning, which town meeting voted on. So that's by right. It's in the law. You get to build that many units by right. And town meeting passed that zoning. And then the other piece of it was, you know, the agreement between the owners of the property and LEGGAT. So there wasn't that possibility. But I think and I'm not trying to put words in their mouths, because they all have their legitimate concerns. My interpretation is oh no, there are going to be a lot of cars. I don't know if it's going to be 5 more an hour or 10 more an hour. What are we going to do to manage this? It's chaos up there. So I believe that there is a solution out there that we have to start looking at. I do think we can get the public support behind it, but I'd like to see you help us partner in this. Again, you know, not saying, you know, just write a check, if that's not the point. Well, you know what I mean. There's going to be improvements that you're going to make, so, you know, but the piece of whatever that would have been, and we would try to collaborate with others as well. You know, I might as well just add on to this now. So another part of my concern is if we look down at are the plans still up there?
I can get it up there.
We just put that back up. There's a crosswalk on Salem Street. That's from the Swampscott, it's the Swampscott exit from the property, entrance or exit. And so you can see where, I don't know if anybody can point, I think. Yeah, okay. So you can see where the crosses the street right there. Okay, so that's where cars are either turning in or coming out. So there's a crosswalk going across there. So if you walk to that little where the pointer is now on the Salem Street side, the other side, that's where the bus stop is, right there, where the 2 pillars are now. And we have a brand new crosswalk right there where you can cross the street, sort of over by where Walgreens is, that side, and that's the bus stop going the other way. Now, if you walk down to the corner, so now down the street, nope, other direction, stay on that left-hand side of the street, and as if you're going to go up Sunbeam Lane, yeah, into Vinnin, up that way. So now there's no more crosswalk. So here is where we have a huge problem. There's a teeny bit of crosswalk on the other side of the street that, you know, with the orthodontist is and the residences at Vinnin up on the hill. There's an itty-bitty bit of sidewalk that goes along that property, and then it disappears. So, and there's no sidewalk along the Walgreens side. So I see this as an issue. And again, it's part of a much larger plan, and it's something that I'd like to, we need to, you know, obviously be in touch with the owners of the property. And I to date have not brought up anything with the owners of the property. I think there's more than one. So just something I think I would like to see this work, which I agree with, your configuration of the sidewalks, expanded so that we can actually create an area where people can walk. I mean, if I get there and now I want to go to Walgreens, I'm in the middle of the road. And that's not, I mean, it's important to your site because Sunbeam Lane it's a private road. It belongs to, I'm not sure who it belongs to, but it's not a town-owned street. So we have kind of an issue with that. But that's going a little further down because I think what you're describing so far is easily kind of, you know, essentially it's figuring out how to structure a bit of walkability into that chaos and free-for-all that is that parking lot. I do, however, think that, you know, moving the bus stop up there as opposed to that opposite corner where it used to, or it was on the opposite corner, right, because it crossed in front of the orthopedist.
Used to be down here.
Yeah, that was a bad spot. So this is far preferable. And so I think that makes sense. I don't know whether your conversation with Marblehead included any kind of a crosswalk down by their exit. No. Okay.
There's not a sidewalk on the other side of Vinnin, so it'd be a crosswalk kind of sort of nowhere. So I think they encourage us to get folks to the corner.
I see.
And
Okay.
put this one in where there are sidewalks.
I mean, and once again, it would be the thing where, you know, the roundabout would address that issue. Which I think is really achievable because you have a very large parking lot there where the Staples is and the Bank of America is, and, there's tons of parking there. I mean, I don't think there's anyone that would dispute that there's way more parking than is necessary, and that if, of course, the property owners would have to be willing to work with us to use some of that to, alleviate traffic and make their own site much more appealing and accessible. But I think that's something that we could definitely look at.
Angela, it's Paul Feldman, if I may.
Hi, Paul.
Good evening.
Hi.
What you're trying to figure out, I mean, this project, although it may feel like it's a large project, as a traffic generator, when you talk to traffic engineers, it's not a particularly large project. And I know, and I appreciate that there's dysfunction in the intersections that you described it, and maybe a roundabout fixes it. That roundabout is an enormous undertaking, not only financially, but the property rights that you just alluded to are very, very complicated. Either people are going to give up their property, or it's going to have to be eminent domain takings. I mean, who knows what's involved. The question is, what do we do with this project that's before the board? What we're suggesting is that the mitigation that our traffic consultant developed, that's been reviewed by DHB, they've agreed that it's appropriate mitigation for the scope of our project. It will mitigate the issues to the extent that our project is aggravating things. But our project can't fix the infrastructure issue that's there. We can work with you and cooperate with you, and it's going to take us a year plus to build this project. So it's conceivable that you can say to us, look, do these physical mitigations that you were planning on doing last after you build the project. We wouldn't do them before anyway, because there's nothing coming online until the project's built. And if, in the meantime, with the planning board's initiative and with the help of others, you get this roundabout constructed, well then we can take the dollars that we were going to invest in these infrastructure improvements, because there were real dollars associated with them, and convert those dollars into the revised design. It's not accomplishable in the next 18 months. Well, then we go forward and we implement what's here, which is appropriate to mitigate our project. But I think to create that kind of scenario allows this project to go forward, and either we're going to mitigate our issues that we're potentially creating the way we've demonstrated and has been described by Jeff Durr, or if there's an alternative design that is helping the more regional issue get addressed, we can take the dollars that would be spent on this mitigation and contribute it to the other plan if it ever comes to fruition and can ever get funded.
Okay.
That's a major thing that you're
Understood.
looking to do.
So I think we're saying the exact same thing, Paul.
Okay, so then it's just a question of fashioning a condition that allows for this mitigation to be substituted and contribution, an equal contribution being made toward a more robust.
Agreed. And, please understand that I'm under no illusions that this is an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
But I also believe that projects like this, for us, it is a really big project. And for Swampscott, I know for, traffic engineers, it's like, small potatoes. For us, it's huge. And it's not, we can't treat it like it's an island, because it's just not. But I understand, I understand our position, I understand your position, and again, I think we're saying the same thing.
And I would just add to that, I think that, it's part of our responsibility as a representative elected board to hear what people, Swampscott, are saying, which is that there is concern about traffic in this area before this project, after this project, and so our responsibility is to investigate any option we have to alleviate that. And I think that's what we'd be doing by looking into this, is seeing if there's a way to make things even better than the traffic engineer has proposed. If there is, great, and if not, you know, we have other mitigation measures that we're talking about tonight, so.
And I haven't even, I mean, honestly, this was the first time that I can't talk to these guys outside of these meetings, so this is the first time I brought it up, so I'd like to hear from other members and see what they think too.
Yeah, I being candid, that intersection right here that we're talking about, Salem and Vinnin streets, is the one intersection in town that I drive so often out of my way to not have to go near that thing, because it's the worst intersection in the area, in my opinion. So I really empathize with the residents who live over there and don't have the ability to literally drive around the other side of town to avoid that. So I think that that solution that you proposed, Angela, would be something that I would be very supportive of us looking into as vigorously as we can, because that is that's a really important intersection in this town. There's a lot of big properties around it, whether they're commercial properties, residential properties, residents that live nearby. So we owe it to ourselves to use this as an opportunity to look at potential solutions, big or small. So very supportive of that.
Yeah, so, excuse me, I agree, it's an interesting proposal, and I don't believe it's on them, like everybody's saying, to foot the bill, but participation in this case could come in as taking a little bit of this corner as well, so that it wouldn't all be in the, what's that, Staples parking lot? Take some of this corner, start the rotary back further, and you could potentially have that all kind of encompassed if Staples doesn't want to kick in a couple of feet.
Again,
Mike just drew it to scale. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah,
okay.
but it does just what Bill was saying, it cuts off a little bit of the corner there to make the circle fit.
We don't know the radius of the circle, right?
Well, yeah, so the details obviously have to be worked out, right? But we're sitting here, we're hypothesizing that Salem Staples, or whoever owns that lot, it's probably not Staples, right? It's
Kimco, I think?
whoever.
Yeah, right, I'm
Yeah,
not
I
sure.
think
We can speculate that maybe they want to help out and give some, but maybe not all, and we could do something here and a little bit from the gas station. You know, there's a lot of space there.
All of this to say that there's many steps between this conversation
Right.
tonight and this rotary materializing, but we owe it to ourselves, as Ted
Right.
said, to see what we can do.
And the
So-
second comment is that rotaries don't have to be round. When we probably roundabouts, I guess they do. So I'm back from the rotary era, not the roundabout era, which is basically the same thing, but it doesn't necessarily have to be round. So it could be maybe not teardrop shaped, but sort of, angled as such that it could be more on the Swampscott LEGGAT side and less on the Staples side if that's not part of the solution.
Again, I want to reiterate that I don't see this as something that's, let's wait till we have this whole thing figured out before we move on. That's not the way I'm looking at this, nor do I think that's even necessary. It's important as part of the traffic conversation, because there are a lot of concerns here that need to be addressed. And I think that could be a really important component. I think figuring it out and organizing this is really on us to, but if we don't have a cooperative partner in terms of the project that's going there for, that, your piece of it, which is, whatever improvements we're going to be, created through, then it's not going to work. All right, so that being said, I thank everyone for their thoughts, and I think we certainly have a lot of work to do. We can summarize that and
I think we're mutually aligned to improve the traffic flow.
Okay.
at the intersection.
Okay. So that sounds good. That sounds good. So
Angela, so
please, go ahead.
as described by your representation, right, that sort of like we can make this intersection based on the plan that was presented by the traffic engineer, the mitigation as good as possible, right? And then if the roundabout idea moves forward on a separate track, right, that funding essentially transfers or something like that. We should formalize any comments of
We
improvements
will
to
definitely
this
formalize our
plan here
comments, right.
separately, yeah,
That would be formalized,
yeah, so.
okay? So it's clear what we're talking about. Importantly, the other reason I bring it up is because of the overwhelming community concern we've had. And you saw the petition. There were, I don't even know how many signatures, but there were a lot. And those are just those people, never mind all the other people I've heard from. There are many, many people that are concerned, and it's understandable why, because people already feel kind of overwhelmed by this, crowding and congestion, and anything, it's like another toothpick is gonna seem like too much. So I think it's important to understand that, and again, I'm maybe interpreting their concerns, but doing another traffic study that just proves that, oh yeah, it is gonna be another % or whatever in terms of cars, isn't gonna change what we do. The problem is that we need better solutions. So that's what I'm trying to address here. So in addition to just suggesting that, it's really addressing community concern that I was hoping to achieve.
I think Jeff spoke to the traffic study
Yep.
concern, that he's inflated the.
I read that, yes, I know that. Thank you.
And
Which-
we haven't had a chance, I guess, to discuss that petition and our feelings as to the merits of the argument that there should be a new petition. Should we talk about that?
Yeah, sure, sure, and-
I guess I'll put myself out
Please,
there
go
first,
ahead.
that I, again, I'm with you, Angela, 100%, I live very close to the area, I understand all of the concerns about the traffic. I'm not sure that spending the time and money on a new traffic study is the best use of resources here, mental energy even. I think that at best, worst, however you want to put it, a new traffic study will change the numbers incrementally in some way, but it won't change the reality, which is that we need to do everything we can to improve the situation at this intersection. And whatever those numbers are, like that qualitative conclusion is more important than the numbers. This idea that we need to make this better. And if the number increases by 0.5% because we did a whole new traffic study, I don't know that effort is worth it. I think that what needs to be done is the effort to make things
That's
better. That's my initial take.
I mean, the
on it.
cars aren't gonna go away. They're gonna keep coming.
Can I
They
add,
just are.
can I add something?
Please.
So maybe I'll direct a question to Jeff, right? The mitigation here for any added cars essentially, to me, seems to be mostly with signal timing. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Yeah. So if there was an increase in 5% in traffic volume, I'm just throwing a number out, right? Well, you said, once the project is occupied, there's a post-occupancy survey and reevaluation of the signal timing, right? So you would reevaluate the signals at that time to make the improvements needed for any more added cars anyway, right? Am I?
Correct, or any changes in traffic patterns, even if they're not related to the project. It's guaranteeing the town that not only do we fix it before we get in place, but also afterwards, we adjust it not only to reflect our traffic, but also anything else that may have happened in the area that added traffic, that maybe didn't have a study in these intersections.
Yeah. So it's like they're gonna tweak it, which is good. So the additional study, not to downplay the concerns, it's gonna be post-evaluated anyway by the equipment.
And if I understand the way that traffic studies work inherently, because I think one of the concerns with the current study that's been raised by the community is the reliance on formulas to address the pandemic.
Right.
And, and so this idea that we need to do this again under current conditions as they are now, but I think even in a, brand new traffic study, if I understand it correctly, car counting is part of it, but a lot of it is still extrapolation and formulas. And so I don't know that it gets us any much further than we already are to have a whole new study. I think we're still going to be relying on formulas to try to figure out what the current conditions actually are.
Yeah.
I would agree. So anything else on that?
No, I agree with Dave, kind of you at the outset. I mean, I think we can all understand what a new traffic study, if we were to do one, gonna say the same thing. Might be a few more cars, a few less. We're talking about a few more cars in a really bad intersection that needs to be fixed. So let's just fix the intersection. I mean, we know what the outcome's gonna be. We gotta figure out how to fix it. Doing a new traffic study is gonna tell us the exact same thing. It's another bad intersection. It's gonna have a few more cars, so we gotta fix. So let's just figure out how to fix it. At the end of the day, we gotta fix it for the guys that live there and shop there and everything, so
Right.
let's just do it right.
Can I ask one more question of Jeff? The intersection of, I think it's Loring, right? And Vinnin, right? So that's
Right.
like the other end
Yeah.
of this? And sometimes there's backups through there too, right?
Well, Loring Ave coming towards Swampscott, and the people that try to make a left off Loring just can't get through because
Yep.
it's backed up because
Yeah,
of that light. Because the cars that are trying to get through that Salem Street light can't move.
right. So I know that
That's
intersection
right.
was included, I think, in the study. Is that signal included in the retiming effort?
So if it's physically connected to the other signals, then yes. I think at our initial review is that it's really the Paradise, Vinnin, and Salem Vinnin intersections that are really the ones that are having probably the more significant issues and would be the most pronounced locations where, to the extent that additional traffic that was, we keep talking about the incremental increase there, to the extent that there were issues associated with that, that's where it's gonna show up. And then, as you know, then it has a choice, once it gets past Paradise, it can go to either end of the triangle there, so there's more dispersal. But really, those two intersections were where we focused on the improvements, because that's where the most pronounced impact of the project would show up.
Gotcha.
So I think your question was the Vinnin intersection at Paradise. It's just toward the Salem side.
It was
So
both, actually.
it's not
I was
the
trying to
next-
include another signal
Oh, down
into the
further
question.
at Essex Street?
Yeah, kind of next to the funeral home over there.
Yeah, that's Essex.
Yep.
They call it Loring in Salem.
All right, Loring, right.
Yeah.
Does it turn, Loring and
I
Salem?
thought you meant,
and,
I thought you meant the right turn from the Paradise intersection.
Oh, yeah.
Yep, sorry.
Yeah. Okay.
Just one troublesome intersection after another, but they all end up converging, so,
Yeah.
yeah, so, all right, so I think where we'll, in terms of traffic, okay, so there were a couple of things I want to discuss, and then, I think, it would be, we can kind of sum up where we are and see, when we're gonna be in a position to kind of wrap things up. I know I had talked about extensions with you. We can talk about that a little afterwards. So traffic within the site is something that I'd like to talk about, okay? And I know, I guess this project has been on my mind for a while, so there's something I'd like to throw out there. Traffic within the site, we've got the sort of, there's a lot of parking, a lot of on-site parking, and some of it's necessary, obviously, but we have underground parking in the Marblehead building, underground parking in number 2, and no underground parking on number 1, so which is our little building here along Salem Street. So, what could make that any better? How could we maybe reclaim some green space on the site and make the project a little better? So I had another idea that I'm just going to throw out there. I also have not had a chance to talk this over, so here goes. So I'm thinking that, what if, on building number 1, you've got ground floor apartments that in my mind they're right on Salem Street. You know, there are headlights going into those ground floor apartments, they have cutie pie little decks coming off them, but I don't want to sit there, people kind of going back and forth. Except for that one that's like way up at the top by the little, you know, entryway. They're just, you know, they're not appealing apartments. Plus, all their parking's outside, so that whole building suffers from not having underground parking. So what if you took out the 12 units on the first floor? Just removed your whole first floor. 12 units are gone. That first floor is now underground parking. And what if you took those 12 units, that 14,600 some odd square foot footprint, and what if you put it on top of building 2? Stepped back a little bit, because it's smaller than building 2. And then, I'm not done yet. What if you took building 2 and you pushed it away from the street? I know it crosses into Marblehead. But only for, you know, crosses into Marblehead maybe 20 feet or something like that. But it just gets a little further back from Paradise. Now you've got building 1, you have no ground floor units, and you have all underground parking. Bonus. Makes the whole building more appealing. Number 2, you've got a 5th floor that overlooks the golf course. Nice. In both situations, it's a better project for you. From my standpoint, my personal opinion, which is all I can talk about right now, is I get a better looking project with more green space. So I'm just throwing it out there. I'd like you to think about it. I've mentioned it to, the only person I talked to was Becky Curran,
The green
who
space,
also has not spoken to her board.
green space is that little parking lot in
Yeah,
there.
here, or, you know, however you want to reconfigure the green space, it's however many spots. Figure if we took out, so, like, right, if all of these are gone,
So just
underground.
shift that underground, and then
Yeah.
this becomes
Or-
grass and
Yeah, and we
trees.
could, you know, and then this gets pushed down, so so this gets pushed down to about here.
Mhm.
So then, no, the top floor is much smaller, it's only about 84% of the size of building 2.
Just,
So, just so I'm clear, first off, you can't push into Marblehead because there's already a restriction in Marblehead.
But I think that they can, I don't think 44 was their max. It is their max?
But is this idea contingent, what if you eliminated that pushing into Marblehead for a second? Would you
Okay,
still
so,
be in
no,
support? Would you
yeah,
still be pushing
I'd
this
still be in
idea?
support.
Okay,
I'd still be in
because maybe
support.
it's easier to talk about if we don't, because, yeah, that piece seems more complicated.
Right.
We should start with just the idea that this building's staying.
Okay, so start with the idea that the building stays in Swampscott.
And then your thought is that the surface parking lots, which surface parking lots?
I was thinking about the one that's, you know, kind of, the one that would
The one on Salem Street?
give us the more bang for the buck in terms of street beauty.
All of the spaces on Salem Street.
Right, so I don't want to look at parking. And we get more green space, so it improves drainage. We reduce a significant amount of the paved surface. We get a greener project, more green space, a better looking project, and you get 2 buildings that are much more marketable. We can waive the height restriction on building 2, if need be. So just, I'm not expecting an answer.
Yeah, we can look at it, yeah,
Why don't you just we can look at it?
yeah.
And I'm curious to see what that makes building 2 look like.
Yeah, I
You're
have no
saying-
idea.
Right, you're saying it'll be stepped, and like everything is pretty uniform. I mean, well, no, it's not. What's nice about it is it's not uniform. It has bump outs and everything, but the 3 buildings are kind of the same look and dimensions to them, and so.
This is just, it's just.
That's what I'm curious to see. Yeah, I'm curious to see what that would look like. with
I'm
the-
thinking about how do I make it greener? How do I make it more lush? How do I make it prettier? I think the buildings, I think you've done a nice job tweaking the roof lines and the skirt, all of that, the materials we like, the landscaping, we can talk a little further about that. We had some comments from the tree committee, which you can review. That type of thing. The green element of it, getting a little more green back, it's a dense site. If we can make that improvement, I feel like the town gets a better project. Have I drawn it? I'm not an architect. Mike's the architect. He can fiddle around with something. You guys are the talent pool. I don't know how to draw that out. So.
I just doodled something. You give me a second. So like the 2 red squares of the parking, right? That you're thinking maybe go away, right? At the south side of building 1, right?
Also would help with the queuing right there, because people that are pulling into those parking spots, if they're slowing down to pull out of the parking spots or into the site, they're gonna jam up that little exit.
Yeah, this
So,
guy right here.
right, so you can eliminate the queuing there, which is one good thing.
I guess the one thought I had about the green space is, whether it's at the part where the parking is now vacated, right? Or you are now have the opportunity to make the corner even grander, maybe by sliding 1 south a touch. I know it starts to get a little closer to 2, and there's a distance, you want to keep those away from each other, right? But then, not only do you increase the green space on the corner a little bit by sliding 1 south, maybe a little bit, you're also freeing up a little extra land in case that roundabout
For the rotary.
comes to fruition, right?
Oh,
Maybe. I know there's a minimum you'd want, like 40 feet probably, between 1 and 2. But
Yeah, at least, yeah.
How much space is between 1 and 2 now in the
I
current
don't know,
design?
I'm not sure.
60, 65, something.
So in theory, you have like 20 or
Like maybe
25
20
feet
feet
to gain
Before
back
you're getting too
potentially.
close, probably, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, it's a thought.
Can I share just a gut reaction?
yeah, sure.
I think the starting point for me was the view of the Salem Street Building 1, as you're, for the residents of Salem and Marblehead and Swampscott who are coming down that street, not to see a stone-based parking garage, but rather to actually see an active residential use, where folks could be sort of outside on those. I know it's not great, but it actually feels like you're not going by a wall, an uninviting wall as a pedestrian down that line. You're going by a series of units, and it's kind of neat, and there's some holiday lights and stuff that's happening there, that it's not particularly dead on that particular side of the street coming out of Sunbeam, coming down Salem and coming in that intersection. I thought that was important. That's why there's no parking under that particular building. I felt differently about going underneath the Marblehead building, we'll call it, when you're past that part. As it is, there's units right on that point of the Marblehead building purposely so that that's what you see. And then you're in the car, you're going by, and there's more room there to screen the parking. So and then there's the balance of units to parking and how, and all those things that we're thinking
understand
about.
that, yeah.
I also didn't know that I could have a 5th
Well,
floor.
Well,
If we go for
you know,
6 stories.
It's the holidays.
That's something that, again, not discussed with the board, but my opinion, my personal opinion would be that first of all, we have the authority to waive the height. So that's not in question.
Yeah.
And second of all, to me, unless I felt it was a really worthwhile advantage for the town, for the site, to eliminate some parking and have more green, I wouldn't suggest it. I also wouldn't suggest something that's like, no, let's take this building and turn it this way or bend it here. I mean, I would not, I'm not asking, look, I'm not saying it's not an ask, it's just, but it's something that is,
Can I ask a question about, so if it was ground floor parking there and at the bottom of building 1 on Salem Street, you mentioned looking at a concrete parking garage as you're driving by. Does it have to be that, or is there I've been thinking, I feel like I've seen like sheer walls that, I don't know if the word's sheer, but
That's kind of the aesthetic, I think.
I see the stone there, no,
You
but,
don't put the shrubbery right up against.
or
it.
I'm just wondering if they're, like, I feel like I've seen parking that doesn't look like parking necessarily. when you first
Yeah,
look
no,
at it.
I think that's true. I mean, we've done a good job of landscaping away the parking that we do have along,
Yeah.
so that Marblehead line. It's just that there's just less sort of human
less
activity
activity,
related
yep.
to that
Well,
versus seeing windows and patios
Yeah.
and doors.
I understand that exactly. I guess I look at it from the flip side. If I'm the human that lives there, I don't like being on the ground floor level. There's constant cars and turning and headlights and just constant noise and constant moving and just constant. And I feel a lack of privacy, and I don't have underground parking. So if I'm the person renting there, I don't like it as much.
There's also a bus stop right there at the corner of
Yeah.
of
the
building
bus
one,
is
right where
there,
a
the
couple
bus is
of
stopping.
patios are, yeah.
Right.
So, it just doesn't seem quite as,
Or is there a reason you can't,
Appealing.
is there a reason you can't dig down for the parking? And leave that
Yeah.
first floor level?
yeah.
What is it?
Cost.
Cost.
Well, it's gotta be cheaper than building a fifth floor,
Nope,
I don't think so.
really.
no.
And fifth floor is fifth floor. We don't transition into steel frame at fifth floor. We
Let's,
need-
let's at least look at it, so.
Okay,
Yeah.
so that's fine. That's all I'm asking.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I don't, did you guys I never, and haven't talked to anybody, so I just want to know if there's any thoughts or,
I'm curious to see what you think
Yeah.
and
Okay.
how it plays out. Because I agree with everything you said, but I really like those patios too. I think they look kind of cool. But everything else I agree with Angela on. I mean,
I want to do obviously what works out best. I just
Yeah.
thought it was worth considering.
and I'm really eager to see what could happen. So, see what happens.
So is there a ledge or something that you have to blast? Is that the problem? Is it because you have to blast for ledge, or?
Nope, no, we don't, there's no ledge there, no. It's
So
just
why
the
such a
cost
cost?
of excavating and then ramping down.
Yeah.
It gets very expensive.
Yeah, as opposed to slab and parking on grade.
Okay.
Bill, if there was a natural grade drop where you could come in and excavate just some, that's helpful, but basically with a flat site, you really is the ramping issue and then the waterproofing issue. And then just the great unknown of what you're gonna find when you dig down that makes that cost that's why you don't see too many underground, unless the grade is supporting it.
Or in an urban context.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure there's plenty more comments where that came from. So I just thought I'd put it out there, and I appreciate more thoughts, consideration from all of you guys to me, and from you gentlemen to me, and all of us. And so we can circle back, as they say,
okay.
on that one.
Yep.
Thanks. And so the one last thing well, not the last, but the other important topic I wanted to bring up was, which I attended the Historic Commission meeting the other night, I think you probably know. I've told you from day one, Bill, that we've been, talking about the Glover homestead that's there, that was, it wasn't, it's funny because a lot of people who live in town just, people see that site differently. They'll look at it and they say, oh, what a mess, and gosh, fix it up. And there's other people who, either been around for a long time or used to go to the restaurant or, from long ago, just remember that it was what its place was in history. And if you're, a bit of a history nerd like I am, that you probably knew, even maybe a little bit more. And I know there's quite a group of people that are very interested, and in addition to the folks in Marblehead who are also very interested. So we do know for a fact that the original 1780 some odd house is there that was owned by the Brit loyalist Brown, and was acquired by John Glover right after the Revolutionary War. And that house is there. Now, we've seen the pictures, so we all know that it's not in great shape. And I know you've discussed with the Historic Commission about, potential salvage and all that, so that's all great. I do know, we know that the original house is there, its foundation is there, so the footprint is there. So we're very, very sensitive to, when it comes to demolition, which I know is a ways off, but as we look at it and we come to demolition, that there is a very special attention paid to that. And I know it's being addressed by, like I said, Marblehead Historical and Swampscott Historic Commission. So I just wanted to voice my support for that as well, and that we'll just, and in terms of, doing a nice memorial to the site, which I know can be, we'll figure it out. But I did speak with Mr. Athanas, who was very gracious with me, and was happy to, get more information for us and some artifacts and so forth, which a couple of which I have, and others that we hope to have for either a shared exhibition at some point or something like that. So I wanted to make sure that I mentioned that in this meeting, because it's I can see from some of my audience members and from myself that it's something that's near and dear to my heart. And I think it should be. I mean, there's no way we can just kind of bulldoze a site and say this is a native site. This is the real deal. This is one of the closest to being a first period house that we have in this area from Revolutionary War times, where we have so much data about what actually happened here and the inhabitants and how important it was. So we just want to make sure that we share that with everybody. And so that was my only other comment for tonight. Please. Oh, I'm sorry. I have to, before I'll close the meeting, I'll take some public comment after. I guess I thought you were. Okay, just give me 1 second. Yeah, I am gonna make it. Hold on a second. Does anyone here want to say anything before we open up to some public comment?
Yeah, I had a couple questions. At the last meeting or the meeting before, I think you had alluded to that the fact that you might be having the power supplied to the properties from Marblehead, the municipal power company. Have you made a decision on that, or has that? Because I know some folks at our last meeting had questions about that.
Right.
So wasn't sure where you are in the process or if that's still ongoing.
I think Steve, or you?
Steve, yeah, I can speak to that. Steve Matarano from Bowler, civil engineer for the project. We have made a slight change to that. Really, the Marblehead building, where you have the municipal power plant in Marblehead, they want to provide power to the Marblehead building, and then we cross jurisdictional lines, and so you've got National Grid providing power to the Salem parcel. So we're providing, the providers of the individual towns will be providing power to those buildings. So we'll have two separate sources to the property.
Gotcha. Okay.
Okay, so then we can follow up on that in terms of the civil plans and so forth, to make sure that we, that's good news to me, because I also know that there are some issues with the power supply.
Right.
That they were anticipating some
Renewable stuff,
yeah, some interruptions, possibly in Marblehead. So I think, and I know that there's a lot of interest in the Swampscott side from our Renewable Energy Committee and others, that we pursue something a little greener or more silver, I guess is the right term.
And then I just had two other quick questions. I know there are EV charging stations. How many do you have on the site, just out of curiosity?
Yeah, it's 15%, which I think was, and they now show up on the plan. I think was at 27, it's here on a note. Sorry, let me pull that up. There are 34 charging stations. There are 17 charging stations that have a double head.
Double, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we did commit to putting conduit in all of the garage spaces for 100% EV charging capability in the future. And the ones on the site are easy enough to add if we ever got to the 100% need for charging stations.
Got it.
And that does show up on, it's now indicated on the set of revised plans. Sheet 1.01 has the note.
Okay. And then last question, do you the affordable units that are in the building, the AMI for that, is that calculated before you, like, is that part of plans, or how does that decision work on what the?
It's per the town requirement, which was 80% of AMI.
That's
Okay, that
in
was
the
on our-
bylaw,
okay.
yeah. We do need to get, there was something, one other piece of information that we had to get from you. And I think that was having to do with that particular, form of affordable housing restriction that satisfies the requirements of 4880. So, what I will do is, I'll make sure that I follow up with you on anything that, just like this kind of a thing. I also want to make sure that you have all of the comments from all of the boards and committees. Okay, and especially the ones that, our board will review. And I want to, that those comments will get added to the, any, preliminary decisions that we put together.
Yeah, those were posted recently, and we are going through that list.
Okay,
Including fire department, which
Yep.
we've already met. I can talk about that a little bit if you like tonight.
sure, I'd actually like to know, because I know they were going to coordinate that with Marblehead.
Yeah, see if I can pull up, I have a fire safety slide here. If I can share my screen. Where'd it go? Sorry, bear with me. Come on. Sorry about that. So I had a meeting with the fire chief, the deputy fire chief from Swampscott Potts, and Chief Gilliland from Marblehead together, which is really good.
Great, yeah,
I had their comments that they had gotten together and reviewed the project together, and then they sent us comments on the 11th of October. And we went through them kind of one by one, and we showed them a site plan that showed how the fire truck can flow through the site for each of the towns, and the city of Salem's truck for that matter. And then there are some points that they said, they'd like to have a coordinated review of the plans when, ultimately, there's the plans now, and then there's the final construction
Right.
permit set, and we agreed, of course, they could coordinate that review of that construction document set. We looked at the plan and figured out where they would want to hook up for if there's a fire situation, their particular equipment, where the fire department connections would be, so we know where those are going. We agreed on where the fire alarm control panels would be, there'd be a central one in the amenity building, and then individual remote panels in each of the lobbies, where the Knox box key stations are, that there'd be BDA systems within the buildings, heat detectors, this whole list you see here. Basically, they gave us a list of what they thought made sense. We totally agreed. Fire safety is critical. We agreed on basically all of their comments. But we got some really good feedback on some specifics on where to
Great.
locate equipment for the future. So we think we're good with them. They asked also for the ability maybe to get behind the Vinnin, the building on the golf course rather, with just a pedestrian path that would be maintained. We have concerns about golf balls heading out that way, but we might have it just gated off so that it can't
Yeah.
be used by a day-to-day pedestrian, but could be used in a case of a fire emergency. Those kinds of things were in a letter I wrote to and copied, I think, you, Angela, perhaps, or Marzi, and Becky, and the two chiefs, to just say, here's what I heard in the meeting, here's what we're agreeing to do. So that should be. So that meeting, that letter was dated December 8th, which I went through all those particular comments
Great.
that you see on the screen here. See if I left any out. A couple of things that were not on their original comment list that they wanted us to be sure was that we'd put the swimming pool chemicals in a particular storage way that they store them. They liked where we had our EV chargers in the parking garage near the entrances and then the outside wall. They mentioned that they liked what we did with those. Those kinds of things. Were listed. There's like a
And you said there was a call box in both towns, is that right? Was there?
Yeah, there's the BDAs are a way for the radios to
Oh, that's
talk
what
all
they-
one to
okay,
the other. between the departments. But they would all get to this central fire alarm control panel in the amenity building that tells them exactly, it's addressable, tells them exactly
Great.
where the issue is and where to go.
Okay.
When they get to the lobby of a particular building, it's gonna say Unit 104, that's where the heat detector's going off, and that they know where to go
Okay.
rapidly.
So they did the drive around with the trucks then, so they know it's gonna.
Yes.
Or they did the dive.
We showed it to them on a plan, which looks like
It's
this.
just that rear corner, I guess, and,
You can see the track of the trucks kind of coming through if you look really carefully. So we demonstrated that the trucks can flow through. Salem has a particularly, a little bit of a larger truck, so that's almost, if you will, the worst-case scenario.
okay.
So that, we think we're left in a good place with both the fire prevention folks.
Great, that's very helpful.
So that area behind Building 2 may turn into a bit of a walk or a sort of
Yeah,
drivable surface or something, or?
not drivable.
Not drivable.
They said they didn't need to drive, but
Okay.
the thought was, to the extent that it's, say it was heavily landscaped or full of snow.
Yeah.
And they needed to get back there with a ladder.
Yeah.
Or a hose for that matter, they'd want to have a good clear path, so that seemed to make sense. Something that could be, snow blowed clear
Okay.
in the winter.
It's actually like a golf cart path too that's on, it goes up along the fence property line for a little while. I'm not sure if it goes up all the way, but I'm just thinking about how stable that surface is. Well, that sounds good for the fire. I'm glad to hear that. Those trucks are, yeah, they're big. In terms of the civil plans and the coordination between where, I think the water's all coming from Swampscott, is that correct? But all the drainage is going out through Salem.
You can have, Bowler has an update on status of the plans as well.
Okay.
They were prepared to talk about that, I believe.
Okay, great.
Right?
Yep,
Yeah, here, I can share.
sure, I'll stop sharing, Steve. I know you.
Yeah, which you covered most of the highlights that we had on the civil set, so I can flip through the utilities just to quickly make sure everybody's up to date, so I'll just share this right here. Alright. Good, so, you should be able to see that now. We talked through all of the on-street crossings. We did make an adjustment, per some comments of internal site circulation and how to make sure the cars, traverse slowly through the property. So obviously, besides just we added several jogs in there. Those are all meant to be traffic calming jogs, and the parking along this is also traffic calming. But here we've introduced a raised crosswalk, again, just another traffic calming where there is a longer straight-ish stretch there. It's not a 90-degree turn. It's bending, but we thought that was a good add with some suggestions to look at that, and it works pretty well in that location. So that's been added. We still at the other crossings, these would be regular crossings because folks are coming to a 90-degree bend here, so don't think there's a high rate of speed in that area. So it didn't work as well in those areas, so we left those at grade. We did some realignment here, which obviously we're tweaking building locations. We'll continue to revisit this area, but really trying to get we talked about some of the materiality coming in here, and obviously we're trying to respond to the ramps that we're creating and get folks to the crossings, right? So that we're trying to make a little more sense to help people find these locations with the improvements to the crosswalks and the internal walkways. And then the last change actually is right here, blue light station. We added blue light station. We tucked that into the property with just a concrete apron that connects out to the sidewalk. So that's a pretty prototypical way to do it. So the blue light stations aren't in the way of plowing actual sidewalks. They can stay there year round. And they're which is kind of tucked just out of the way of the public realm, so, but adjacent to it, right, so, and they're available to everybody, so it's a really good location. Don't want it right at the corner, because we don't want people gathering and getting bikes and blocking the intersection for people crossing, so just set back a little bit for the intersection, so I think that's a good spot, for the blue bikes. And then just clicking forward to the drainage. So the way the drainage works, we do have, we're just maintaining existing drainage patterns, but again, we have in the Marblehead side, which as was stated, all the water does end up in Salem. So we are coordinating with Salem and meeting their requirements. The nice thing is the state has been sort of imposing water quality and infiltration requirements on the individual towns and cities. So everybody has a pretty similar requirements. So we're taking it to that state level and the local levels for treatment and quality before we discharge, and all the discharges off the site are produced for all the analyzed storms. So small storms up to a 100-year storm is what we look at. Each scenario will be a reduction. But we do disconnect. We have a connection to the same point in Vinnin Street, and then similarly, based on coordination with the Swampscott Public Works, we have a connection here in this manhole here that's in Salem Street, which again is an existing connection from the site. We're maintaining that connection point after it goes through our on-site treatment and infiltration systems and detention systems. So maintaining those patterns, but greatly improving the water quality is the biggest improvement that these systems are focused on, and reduction in peak flows coming off the property. And then just lastly, the electric we talked about, we do show the separate systems. We show a feed coming in here from the Swampscott side, and some equipment tucked into the property, closer to the buildings, and then we have a separate, it comes in this backup service here that is the Swampscott, Marblehead equipment feeding Marblehead. Again, trying to tuck those in to the site and not right out on the sidewalk of the main street. Again, some of those things that Thad had mentioned is just trying to create the best streetscape we can and tuck these utilities back, sort of hidden in the parking lot or hidden in some landscape areas. So I think that those are really the updates. A lot of the other information is the same. We are feeding all the buildings, as we said, from Swampscott water, and we had a good conversation with the water superintendent and talked about the quality of the service line in Salem Street. They got some state money, some MWA money to reline that pipe, so the pipes in probably one of the better conditioned pipes in Salem, because they did get that money to reline it and make it effectively a new line. So it's good for us, and get better water quality, better water flows through a pipe that's been rehabilitated recently. So all good. They don't have any concerns with that connection as shown. So still work through the details with them, of course, and similar to the fire department, they get updated plans as we go. So we'll continue to work through them up to a building permit and probably beyond. So happy to answer any questions on the civil or utility connections. Anybody has them?
I think you had the, I'm thinking about the, I guess the sewer and drainage plan. We had the peer review on that, but that would be, I'm sure you've had a chance to review all that as well.
We did. We issued a response to that letter. Some of the items we've incorporated into the plans already. Some we've
I don't think I have that.
suggested.
I'll get it. Don't just, I'll get it.
Sure, and we're still working through. We're still talking to the departments and
Okay.
peer reviewers and gathering some survey data, and we'll keep updating those items that were requested. But we think they're agreeable. The comments were good. Some, Like I said, some have been incorporated into the plans now, some we've suggested should be prior to building permit as a conditional item, and then some we're trying to gather a little more data at this point in time. Some survey data relative to the crosswalks and make sure we've got the right reciprocal ramps for those crosswalks that we're modifying or touching the ramp on our side. We're obligated to touch the ramp on the other. So we've got a little bit of ongoing work there, but I think we're agreeable to the comments in there for conditions.
Okay.
Are you the right person to ask about landscape improvements? The trees and the plantings and stuff?
We are the right company, but I'm gonna let Jay Emperor take over, because he probably is better suited. He's our landscape architect.
Gotcha. Just checking.
Says Jay.
I am here, happy to answer any questions. Jay Bowler.
Hey, Jay.
Jay, do you want me to put on a screen, or do you want to control?
I have a landscape plan I can just put up.
Great.
Okay, I'll give up the control then.
Okay. I can just touch on a couple of things that before Josh kind of indicates some areas. The corner, we talked about the path, I won't go through that. The historic marker at the intersection of the town lines, from the Historic Commission, we're going to expand on that. The blue lights we touched on, we did add another walkway here for environmental health requests for people exiting this building. So there is a direct access to the sidewalk just as a front door, so instead of a sidewalk to the street. But this is to encourage any pedestrians to go towards crosswalk or future adjustments of that intersection. We added additional evergreens along this edge here. And then in talks with the golf course, there will be a new chain link fence along this perimeter of the property. We did receive comments from the open space committee and the tree committee that we're evaluating right now. The majority of them were related to species selections and whatnot, so happy to adjust based on their recommendations.
That would be wonderful. We'd appreciate that.
Sure. Happy to answer any questions.
No, I didn't have any questions. I just wanted to make sure you received those reports because I
Okay,
was very supportive of the tree committee's report in particular.
Gotcha.
So.
Yep. Just to that, the fire department request for access behind building 2 may affect some of the trees that we were planning on keeping back here. So we'll work with civil and see work together to try to maintain as many of those trees as we can while providing access back there.
Not to put you on the spot, Jay, since this just came up earlier tonight, but we were talking about, gaining green space where that, if that surface level parking went underneath building 1. Off the top of your head, do you have any idea, if you had extra space to play with as a landscape architect, what you could do in that area if it became available green space?
Yeah, that is tricky. I just in general, perhaps a wider buffer at the perimeter, maybe down this zone, down here. We do have a berm along this edge and this edge, so screening will already be provided. But honestly, probably more incremental changes. Maybe a fewer parking spots here or there, or it would be massaged to create some wider spaces next to walkways and whatnot. But I think we have a lot of great uses on the property already with the clubhouse, we have the dog run, we have the common area in the middle. So maybe just buffer areas at the perimeter. Again, with a busy intersection, potentially a rotary at the intersections in Salem Street and Vinnin, creating a larger green is nice, but it's not really space that can be activated too much. It's more of a visual space.
Right.
So probably more incremental changes than large, unfortunately, large swaths or another use. agreed into the
Sure.
space.
Makes sense.
Anything else? And anything else from you guys right now?
We could update you on the historical commission meeting, but it sounds like maybe you'd listen to that.
I
or-
went, but you should update the rest of the board.
Yeah, I can, let me try to quickly again share screen. So there's a meeting on December 8th. And we received from the Historical Commission 4 requests, and we looked into them, and then we responded at the meeting, and then there's a couple more that came through, which we're ready to respond to. The process for the demolition is that you apply for a demolition permit with the building inspector, who forwards it to the commission, then there's a formal hearing. At that point, we believe we'll have wrapped up the issue. We appreciate the history of the building. Unfortunately, the original house has had pretty much 3 of its walls removed to add on to these extra wings, and then part of the building has collapsed in on itself and so forth. So it's not particularly salvageable. I did sneak in there and look to see if there was some, to see if the frame was there, like that does not appear, the actual original frame is really there anymore. The big chimney is in the middle, but I was hoping to find a good old wood frame that somebody could salvage, but I didn't see it. Oh, I'm sorry. That might be Melissa.
There you go. I will do it.
So one thought was, can we incorporate, we did site walk, Historical Commission was there, many of the members, and they talked about, we looked at some artifacts, some really great iron fencing, some lampposts, some cast iron lampposts, the sundial, and so forth, and could we incorporate them in the design? So I went back out, did another inventory, and then I got a plan that I showed them where we thought we'd use some of these elements. We agreed to do the Form B type historical research on all of the buildings. Marblehead has a person that they've used before successfully. They asked us to engage him. I talked to him. He seems ready and able to do it, so we agreed that we would do that.
Great.
And then if they're during the course of excavation and demolition, if there are things that are of value, archaeological value, we certainly would alert the commission and sort of, stop for a second and grab our breath about it, if you will. And then the commission was wanting the ability to look at the feasibility of moving any of the buildings to a new location, and we're certainly amenable to that. Needs to happen, within the time frame of the actual project demolition, of course, but that's a ways away. So those are the 4 items that came up in their requests, and those are our responses. And then we, as I said, I went out to the site, I did the inventory. There were about 9 of these 8-foot tall cast iron lampposts from probably the 1920s, 10s, 20s. They're interesting. Some of them have some cracks in them, so we think we can salvage, let's say we salvage 6 of them at least. They need to be rewired and relamped. But we put 4 of them around this sort of monument area, we're calling it, and I'll show you what that plan looks like, just to sort of mark the spot. That's where also we're planning moving the sundial. And then we're going to put 2 of them at the bus stop area where we're saving the pier, so they really we're trying to group the history, if you will, together. There's a potential for some of these iron gates to also back up that bus stop, so there's 2 benches now shown, the iron gates, the lamps, be a nice little spot that the public will really enjoy in that spot, because it's almost right opposite Sunbeam. And so that's what we looked at. Buried in these bushes are some pretty interesting fences from a company in Boston on Portland Street back in the day in the 20s. They did the Frick Estate in Beverly, those famous gates you might see in 127. So we're going to try to use some of that. There's like 45 feet of that fencing. So this plan here kind of showed where it was, and then we suggested where it was going to go. And then this spot here where the 3 towns, 1 city and 2 towns intersect, we thought, well, that's a great spot to mark. It's highly visible to have something that would suggest recollect the history. So we talked about this kind of idea where there'd be some benches, the 4 cast iron lampposts, the sundial right at that intersection point, and an interpretive marker, and the Historical Commission
Okay.
has suggested they'd help us with the script and what that would
Right.
want to say. So there's a good stopping point here where all those paths come together.
Okay.
It's highly visible. So that's how we left it with the commission. I think they were pretty pleased with our effort.
Okay, I would just say that in terms of the demolition, and I'm not suggesting that an entire project gets held up by an archaeological dig, but I would like to request that special attention be paid to the actual footprint of the building, which we know is there, because it's the stone foundation is there. We've got the original brick hearth that's there. I mean, it's stone hearth, it's not brick. And I'd like to make sure that it gets documented photographically. I don't want that piece of the property wrecking balled, so, I mean, there's other, just to be able to, cautiously take things apart so that we can do a full photographic documentation, would be greatly appreciated.
Yeah, that seems reasonable.
Thank you. Does anyone mind if we take some public comment?
Can I add one more
I'm going
thing?
to let
Just
Mike go first. Go
Right
ahead.
before we take public comment. First of all, it's going to be the nicest bus stop in all of Swampscott, I
Yeah,
think.
it is.
High bar.
It's nice, right? Oh, not really. We touched on affordable housing for like a second.
Please.
Do you have a plan in this package that shows the distribution of the units?
Not yet.
Not yet, but you will at some point.
Right, I think that's one part of that, the report that has to be submitted or something like that, so.
Yeah, we often just mark with a circle or something, and they're distributed by floor and side of the building and
Yeah, they're kind of
unit
like not-
type, so that,
Right,
and they're not differentiatable, if that's a word,
right.
one from the other.
Right. Okay, yeah, I just want to
Because
see
they
that
have to
eventually.
comply with the, all the.
Sure.
the
Yep.
guidelines.
All right, that's my
Good
only,
question.
that's my last comment, so.
Now, does anyone have any objections to taking some public comment? Okay, please.
So Brian Roman, and part of the Historic Society, which is not the Historic Commission. My question.
Brian, I'm sorry, if you wouldn't mind just approaching the microphone, that way
Oh,
our Zoom
sorry, I was
friends
supposed
can
to
hear
say
you as
that.
well. Oh, thank you.
So my
Thanks, Dad.
question is on the process of the wrecking ball, which is to say, when it's decided that the site's to be leveled, who gives that authority? That's a process question. Is that,
That would be the building inspector. It's, the applicant would supply a demolition permit. With this application, we would require a demolition plan in which all the conditions that we've talked about would be ironed out, exactly how we're gonna do it, and that covers everything from, protecting the site, disposal of asbestos, to doing the exact things that we're talking about. How every, particular structure gets handled, what gets,
so on some
request-
properties, there's a 9-month delay. Is that applicable to this project?
That's not up to me.
Okay. And then the question is, if a group wants to, move some of the historical property or buildings, what's the process for
I
that?
think that the applicant has been pretty open about, being willing to work with the commission in terms of, whatever has been identified as salvage. Is that, am I right? I don't want to put words in anyone's mouth. That was my
So-
understanding.
I think that's correct.
So I just want to make sure everybody knows that the historic Humphrey House in Swampscott is part of the Historic Society, and that's different than the Historic Commission, and so
That's correct.
there's a second group which would be, I think should be brought into this, which would be the Historic Society, because they have done the Humphrey House.
Yeah.
And it might
And
do
I would
this.
recommend, in fact, I think it's great that you're here too, Molly, because I think it would be really important for you to work together as to, connect with the commission. The commission is the government agency, so they have some regulatory authority, they hold public meetings and so forth. The society is a private organization, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so without getting into a lot of detail, I think it's, and the Marblehead's got the same deal, really. It's important that, I would recommend that that the society and the commission coordinate your efforts together. So maybe you just hold a joint meeting or, whatever it is, but building on the request that they've made to make sure all of your concerns are met, and then we can certainly bring it back to the petitioner and just, I don't think that your needs and desires are that much, are far removed from what they're hoping to do, but I think it's, the more information we get, the better.
Perhaps,
Oh.
you want to say something about it?
Oh, I'm good.
No, that's all right. I mean, society has the fundings that work with the buildings, historically in Swampscott. And I don't, on the letter from the commission, I don't think the society was on copy, that's all. And that's an issue.
It is an issue, and I would recommend that you try to set up a meeting with them. You should definitely be working together. I think it would make the most sense. Yes.
My name is Duncan Maitland, and
Hi, Duncan.
I am part of the Board of Governors for the Swampscott Historical Society. And my concern is that, in my estimation, Swampscott cannot afford to lose any 18th century building that still exists within the confines of Swampscott. The major building that is most upsetting to me was the Blaney House, and that was torn down to accommodate a florist shop as far as being built on the property. Blaney Beach, which another name is Fisherman's Beach. All of that is combined in that central area of Swampscott. I feel that we should have somehow had at least one person, if not more than one person, do a walkthrough, or have you, Angela, been inside that building?
Not for 50 years. Used to work.
All right. What I'm wondering is the central chimney.
I think the central chimney is standing, the stone chimney, but, and some of the brick chimneys that were built subsequently are standing, but, and I've not been inside the building. I don't know that I'd want to, step inside. I mean, I'd love to, but I'm not sure how accessible it is. A lot of
Well, I
floors
understand
have.
from the walkthrough we did that we were told that essentially no one from the public could go in the building
Right,
from a
yeah.
safety perspective.
Seemed a little unsafe. So I hear you, and
Well, what I'm wondering about is the central chimney
Yep.
in an authentic, and somehow in my mind, that building dates back to possibly 1730.
Possibly, yeah.
And the construction as far as the chimney, because the weight of that chimney is so immense as far as the fireplaces and everything connected to it, that it should have an arch support in the basement.
Possibly.
Now, the Humphrey House does not have a center chimney, because when the house was moved from Elmwood Road to Paradise Road, they left the chimney behind.
Huh.
So that, to me, is an important piece of
Yep.
the entire building, let alone the connection to probably the most important person outside of George Washington as far as the Revolutionary War
That's true.
is concerned.
So,
And Swampscott has a
Ed-
claim to that person through the building that we now are talking about.
right.
As does Marblehead with the building that Glover lived in during the time he was
Right.
with George Washington as
Well,
far as,
fortunately, that building survived as a house, and it never, it was continually maintained, and it was, as you know, that entire part of Marblehead is one huge historic district, so fortunately for them, nothing ever got modified or changed or anything like that. As far as I couldn't agree with you more that we should have had, historic, we should have had
an inventory.
that inventory should have been done on that property. I mean,
Years ago.
many moons ago, since it's been, for as long as I've, as long as I know, it's always been known to be a historic site. It wasn't always clear, because he had his house in Marblehead, and, it wasn't exactly always clear, like, when he acquired it, and was it an inn, or did he live there? But we do know that now, that he, did acquire it around 1781 and lived there through the end of his life. So we do have a lot of information. But I will say to you that the only way we could have done anything, we, meaning the town, could have done anything differently would have been to have had it inventoried long, long ago, which would have, at least been something. But at this point, Thad was, at the meeting, when you were at the historical committee the other night, you showed a photograph of that fireplace, that
Yes.
big stone hearth. So we know, in fact, that it's intact.
Yeah,
So if
yeah.
there was, in going through this process of, taking apart the buildings, I think if there were monies, any ways to figure out how to move that, this is a conversation that, we should prepare for and that you could have.
I'd like to make another, or put on the floor another suggestion. The Lynn Historical Society, in their old building on Green Street, had a very unique room in the basement of that museum. And that room was a complete build rendition of a Revolutionary house where the person went to battle and never returned. And it was like you were in the house as far as how well done it was. And is there any possibility that at least one room in that house could be reconstructed some other place? Not moving the whole building, just so Swampscott still has a claim to that house that we've had for many years and never really appreciated what we had. And now it's going to disappear forever.
Now, here's what I would ask you to do. First of all, I think that it would be my recommendation that the society collaborate with the commission and just insist that you want to work together. And second of all, I would contact the Lynn Museum and Mass Historical and see what kind of resources you can
Grants
pull
or
together.
whatever. All right.
And then, then we can communicate. I mean, we do have, demolition will happen at some point. But we have time now. This is the time to have any conversations because we have a petitioner who's been, he's been very willing to help us out with requests and been very open and amenable to requests. So I think if there's an opportunity here to work together, and it's, it's possible, if it's possible, then it's possible. Let's just figure it out. Pardon me?
How much time do you think?
Well, what did you say, next summer in terms of demolition? We have time. Less than that. Tomorrow would be a good time to get started. Because these things take time, right?
They do. But I mean, one room is,
I understand what you're saying. Like, I don't know if I can say I'm I think we share the same interest in this, so let's just leave it at that. I understand how you feel about it, and I think you're not alone. I think there's a lot of people that share that level of interest, so the point is, it's on us to get our resources together and figure out, if that's there, then what can we do? Could you share those pictures with me too? You don't have to have them right now.
Yeah,
but
I
if
don't,
you-
yeah.
If you
yeah.
could just share them with
Yeah.
me, that would be helpful.
I-
Then
yeah,
we can, then we give them a basis to, get some
Sure.
information.
I mean, I've seen postcards, but I'm not
No, I'm
seeing
talking about
what's-
the inside. He was able to get his camera through some glass and get inside pictures.
All right.
And they're quite good, so.
Yeah, and I'd caution you, the building is not safe, so we'll get, I can share the photos, but you.
No, I'm just saying so that they can use them in gathering information.
Absolutely, I just would be careful of the building
Understood.
for a whole bunch of reasons. Structural,
Yep.
glass broken, all of that is not a
Yeah.
safe place for humans.
Understood.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes,
Now, historically, if a building is going to
this is
be
Douglas. We had
ripped
Duncan, now we
down,
have Douglas.
it has some historical, well, Doug Maitland,
I know.
a former member of the Swampscott Historical Commission and Swampscott Historical Committee for 22 years. What I'm interested in is the documentation of the building before it's destroyed. And will that information and photos and so on be put on the town website?
I would imagine it will be. There will
Well,
be.
could we-
I mean, this is an interest that's shared with the town of Marblehead. They too want the site documented. So I know in speaking with the planner there, they also have their Form B that they want to, get working on. We have ours. I know that's a process that I guess is about to be initiated. And whatever, that'll, not only would it, once we submit that in its entirety, which takes a little time to get together, not only will it be on the town website, it's on Macros, so it's on the internet. I mean, it's very easy to access.
And
That would
Okay?
be my
So we'll keep you posted. I can promise you that.
That form submitted by the planning board?
No, we don't have anything. That's submitted through a consultant that they are hiring through the Historic Commission and the town of Marblehead.
So how do we see that?
It will, once the Form B has been complete, it goes to the state, and and if they accept it, it takes a little time, and they get back to you, and they let you know a site's been accepted. Everything gets uploaded into the site called Macris. It's MACRIS.
Goes to the state historical.
That's great. That's correct. Okay? And once you meet with the Historical Commission, they can fill you in on all those details and how it gets done. You go on there now, all our historical inventory's on there.
Thank you for listening.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks for coming to our meeting. Any other comments tonight? And do we have anyone online, Marissa?
I think we do, yeah. I saw some hands raised. Okay, just calling on them in order that I see them. Oh,
We have Ryan here.
I know, I was just thinking about you.
there was someone's hand that I accidentally just lowered without allowing you
It
to
was
talk.
Ryan's, and he's sitting.
Oh, okay, great. All right. I accidentally unmuted Verena from the Swampscott Tree Committee, but, okay, Verena.
Verena.
Okay.
Hi, Verena.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. I also wanted to congratulate you on the meeting. It's really very well run, and everybody's contributions were great. So I'm the chair of the tree committee, and we mentioned that our feedback was submitted a couple of times. I was just wondering when you get to hear back from the landscape architect and others. So there were, I think, two main concerns in my mind. One is, how do we save more trees, especially on the intersection of Vinnin and Salem Street, where that entrance is planned and all the paths. There are some deciduous trees that could be maybe saved. And then another comment we had was around the parking lots, the outside parking lots. There were some large stretches that didn't have any landscaping buffers. Our zoning bylaws actually request that there's no more 15 contiguous runs of parking spaces that are uninterrupted, so maybe that can be considered.
Was that in your?
Yeah, when will we hear back on these things, I guess is our main question.
Excuse me, Jennifer from Bowler, Alliance Architects. So we did receive those comments in last week. We are reviewing them. I think most of them are easy to address. A lot of them were species recommendations, and again, happy to work with you on those. Also happy to walk the site and review any trees that are there. I think there's a lot of them look better than they actually will in person. There's some older deciduous trees there, but we definitely want to work to keep what we can. It's feasible. Will be like grading changes with the buildings, with the walkways to make accessible entrances and whatnot. But what we can keep, probably more of the perimeter, we'll definitely want to keep. On the plan, we'll work closely with civil. Things are getting more finalized to indicate areas where that vegetation can be maintained. And then again, being on site and discussing particular trees, we're happy to do that. As per the stretches of parking, we'll work with civil to integrate islands where necessary to break up those long runs. I think we have 17, so we'll integrate an island in that run, and we'll definitely take care of those. So we are reviewing those and take comments.
Yeah, and I also want to mention, we are happy to collaborate with you. You mentioned maybe do a site visit together, maybe in the spring when the trees are leafing out again. We did that very successfully actually with our new elementary school project. We were able to save some of the old oak trees there, and that was very, I think in the face of climate change and what's happening with habitat loss around us is a good thing. Anything we can do.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's a more mature site, which I think helps everybody as well. We'll integrate the historic elements that I've been speaking to, and having mature trees there, it just all goes to a vernacular that we feel is appropriate for the site.
Great. And maybe one last question: is there actually a survey of the existing trees? I saw the demolition plan, and I think most of the trees are slated for removal, with the exception of a very few. But is there actually a survey of what the trees are, what the sizes are?
Don't believe there's an official tree survey, but again, I think we walk the site, we'll be able to indicate mark those trees with you.
Okay.
Verena, in terms of the demolition plan, you're probably referring to the demolition notes that are in the existing plans, which is just a lot of that is just kind of boilerplate information about typically how a site gets prepared and the precautions that need to be taken and the supervisory issues that need to happen. So typically once a demolition plan, if the formal plan gets submitted, it's far more detailed. And it would include, in this case, we could get much more into the, no pun intended, into the weeds on the landscaping piece of it. So just to let you know.
Okay. So we are available to help out and work with you on that.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, any other comments? I know Ryan Hale.
Thanks, everybody. So I'm Ryan Hale. I'm a town meeting member and the chair of the Renewable Energy Committee, and also on the Capital Improvement Committee. So I have one traffic-related question, and then a whole bunch of energy around the design of the building. So should we start with traffic? I didn't hear anything in the comments before about bicycle safety or any sort of data that was collected about bicycle traffic during the traffic study. So could you please tell me what you know about bicycle traffic in the area and how your designs are going to improve the safety of cyclists through that part of our town? And then I'll come back to the actual building design stuff after that.
So it's a very good question. We do collect bicycle data as a part of our traffic count, so we do have that information. I don't have it at my hand, but it was collected as a part of our study. And those bicycle counts were done in August, so it's favorable weather conditions. So we do include cyclists as a part of our analysis. one of the biggest things that we're doing as a part of the project is making sure that the driveway design as well as the internal circulation accommodates bicyclists. So if we start from within the site, we are going to have bicycle racks and bicycle parking. So exterior bicycle racks for short-term bicycle parking, and then interior bicycle parking, weather protected for long-term. So we start with that within the site. As we proceed off-site, any of the improvements that we're designing, we spent a lot of time talking about pedestrians, but we're also looking at bicycle activity as it relates to the improvements that we're going to construct. So as we're looking at not only wheelchair ramps, we're looking at drainage and the catch basins to make sure that those are bicycle compliant in terms of not trapping any wheels in those. But as we're adjusting the traffic signal timing, and I was mentioning about the sensors in the pavement, as you probably know, because if you're a cyclist, those detectors are set to detect bicyclists as well. So, I spend a lot of time talking about, more vehicle traffic, but we are sensitive to bicycle accommodations. And when we're timing the traffic signals, we are looking at bicycle accommodations at the intersections as they relate to the operations of the traffic signal. So that will all be considered as a part of our retiming and reevaluation of those signal systems. And making sure that the detection system is working properly to not only detect vehicles, but also to detect bicycles.
Okay, great. And so the actual road design, I don't really understand where the scope of this project ends, where who owns the street and who owns the land. So if we're talking about bicycle lanes or paint and markings in the intersections, drive through Salem and you see some of the improvements that they've made to actually move, park cars to protect cyclists from the moving traffic, all that stuff. So is that in scope for you guys in terms of road markings, or is that the state's problem?
Not in this area, but to the extent that the town, we could add sharrows to pavement markings, but we're not widening the road to put bicycle lanes into the area.
Okay.
Even, it's not something that we could do. It would be very spot-like in terms of where we could provide it. But we can do things like the pavement markings and the signs and things like that. But we don't have anything that's as dramatic as what you described out in Salem, where we have opportunities to use a parking lane, create a buffer, bike lane, things like that. It's just not something that exists in this area.
Okay, cool, thank you. Yeah. And so maybe we just move on to the building design itself. So I'd love to hear from whoever's designing the building what your thoughts are about the upcoming changes to stretch code and the opportunity to really set a leadership position for our town in terms of energy efficient design. Do you guys have, how do you feel about passive house? How do you feel about a HERS rating for this building? Are we going full electric? Just tell me what you guys have thought about since last time around the energy efficiency of this structure, please.
I have a sustainability sort of set of slides I can go through real quick that touch most of what I think you're talking about, if that's okay.
Great.
I'm also getting an alert that my computer battery is dying, so I don't know if you guys paid your electric bill or not, but.
It's actually the solar panels on the roof are what's charging your laptop right now.
So we're headed for a minimum of a LEED Silver certifiable. We probably won't actually go through the program, but we use the outline of the program as our basis for thinking about sustainability. And as you know, there's the 6 different categories that you go through, and we've gone through their kind of checklist and said, okay, can we land at a silver rating? And I think the answer is yes. Projects like this use this LEED version 4 for homes, building and design and construction for multifamily. In any event, one of the categories is this location and transportation. The big deal on this site is that it has been previously developed and it's in the middle of this area with all the mass transit. Look at that. Thank you. Hopefully that was what it was.
You just have to start pedaling to make that one.
Yeah. The density of the site, the fact that it's 30 units per acre is actually good, and the fact that all these bicycling station facilities are provided. So that's sort of the first step. The fact that we're handling our stormwater runoff and we have a pretty lots of contiguous open space and a full-blown landscape plan, and reducing the amount of heat island effect with the trees and the use of white roofing is in the sustainability category. We're being water efficient with how the plants we're picking and so forth. We are Energy Star rated. I think that shows up in this This relates to the new stretch energy code coming. We'll at least meet the current one, which has these R values. We'll have the continuous exterior insulation application will be solar ready, if not even solar. We'll have solar panels on the roof. We will be using an electric heat pump system for the heating and cooling of the units. That would be with individual controls and metering. We would be Energy Star rated. We will do the HERS rating, and we would do unit commissioning and unit segregation. So we'll meet all those points.
Great.
We'll stop short of passive house at this point. A little bit due to the industry's hasn't quite caught on enough for us to find enough partners to do the detailing so forth. But you can see here, there's a big dedication to the sustainability of that part. The last couple categories are things like materials and resources, like using recycling chutes in the building and putting in a composting program. Then the indoor air quality of, simple things like no smoking on the site, but also exterior clothes dryers, a little bit larger window, fresh air into the units, being brought into the units with an ERV. And I guess that's it. So those are the 6 categories. We take them seriously, and we expect to be, I would say state-of-the-art, maybe not absolutely on the forward cutting edge, but darn close.
Okay, cool. And my R's aren't what they used to be. So I think I heard for the exterior, you guys are using permeable materials for the landscaping, everything to?
I think that came through with the Open Space Committee. We're evaluating how much pervious pavement we'll use beyond the fact that our site is more pervious now than it was when we started.
Okay.
Which, admittedly is a very low bar to hit, but what talked about some of the things tonight will improve that. And then the use of pervious materials in certain places will be part of our program.
Great. And I think I heard you say no natural gas for HVAC. Is that true?
Yeah, I think domestic hot water will be natural gas only. We haven't quite figured out how to do that effectively in this kind of use with individual units.
Yep.
But the actual units themselves, the heating and cooling will be done by electric heat pump. Yes, technology.
Okay.
Yes.
Great. It's great to hear that. I'd love to see if we can raise the bar and get no gas at all at this site if we can, right? If there's whether it's on demand hot water or something, it'd be great to sort of raise to that level. I didn't see a HERS number. Do you guys have a preliminary number yet?
Not yet, but we will get there. And I hear you on the natural gas for domestic hot water. That's something we hear from a lot of folks. So we're trying to figure out how to do it. The individual units don't work within a unit, and for this kind of use, it just seems like you need individual control. Instantaneous hasn't proven to work yet well, cost effectively or maintenance wise. But there's a lot of focus in the industry on just what you're saying is let's get rid of the gas line.
Yep.
And
Okay. Great.
We hear you.
And I heard somebody say earlier EV charging stations was 15%, but I think the new code is 20. So are you guys going to reach 20?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
When the new code comes in and reach 20, we'll start at 15. But we're going to be capable. And clearly, someone making this kind of investment in this property, knowing where we're going with electric charging, it's going to be, the garage will be full of stations in 20 years.
Right, exactly. That's great. So I'm just really, really excited to partner with a firm like you guys who shares the same aspirations as we do to really have Swampscott be a leader in this type of resilient and efficient and sustainable design. So anything that our committee can do to help you guys, we have volunteers that are here in person and listening online and ready to contribute to help us really just really create a project that we're all proud of. So thanks for your help.
No, I appreciate that. That's terrific.
Thank you, Ryan. Ryan, could you, if you have a sort of a list of recommendations or priorities that your group has, could you submit them to me?
Sure.
And that way I can just make sure we keep track of everything.
Will do. Thanks for your help.
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay.
I think we had one more comment on Zoom.
Okay.
Is that Verena again?
Yeah, sorry, I wanted, and this is a building design question, piggybacking on Ryan's comments. Have you thought about green roofs for the buildings? I saw that you said something about white roofs to reflect some.
Yeah, we have mostly pitched roofs. And there's a center section which has kind of a well that would have the electric condensing units for the heat pumps up there. The fire department is not liking the idea of a whole lot of solar panels up there, which we're going to look at how big a space we have and can we put some in and have the firefighters safely traverse the roof. I don't think there'll be room left for a green roof per se on the project.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And we have the same comment about permeable surfaces as much as possible.
Right. Anyone else, Marissa?
Looks like we're all set on Zoom.
Okay. So, anything we haven't covered that we should talk about tonight?
Thought of two more things, well, based on the public comment. So the only thing that's gas is the electric hot water. The cooking is electric too? Is that right?
Cooking's electric.
Cooking's electric too, 'cause that's the other source of gas, right? And then the other thing I thought of was, based on your comments about the chimney, there's not a chance that that chimney falls in an open spot on the plan, right? It falls in a building? Yeah, I thought it might be like-
That's correct.
Okay.
The chimney did not have an arch in the basement,
Yeah.
which may make it more easily moved. I don't know.
Right.
But it's going to be a delicate process to take that building apart safely in the condition it's in now. But we can, I think to the point of what's, a relatively careful demolition process, and then the chimney will stand there, and if somebody has the resources to want to pick it up and
Yeah.
move it, that'd be great.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Good. That's something we can pursue. All right, so for our next meeting in January would be 120 days. So I can't say that we're going to be, we need at least another month past that. Because there's no way that we're going to be able to review everything we talked about tonight and have, I think that I'll be able to put together a pretty good summary with a lot of recommendations. We've covered a lot of ground. And, we have, as a town, we have a lot of work to do on our end here. But I think, especially with the holidays, I just, I think our time is so limited that I just don't see January as happening. So I would like to request that we push it at least 30 days after that, so February. And we can shoot for a February date. Is that agreeable? I know I need to put it in writing, but I just can't, I know that we're not in a position to be able to vote on anything final. If anything changes, we certainly could let you know, but I don't know, we won't have a chance to meet again, so.
So Angela, if my memory serves me correct, I think the current 120-day time period ends at the end of January 2023. So we're going to be with you at
One more
a
meeting.
mid-January meeting. At that mid-January meeting, what we would hope we're going to be at a point where maybe there's even a draft decision where we actually have some conditions that have been articulated, and you may very well be correct that at that January meeting we're not going to be in a position to close the public hearing and vote the project, but at least we're going to have a draft decision to give you a sense. Marblehead is one meeting ahead of you guys.
Yeah.
We started the public hearing process with Marblehead one meeting before, and tomorrow night we'll go to Marblehead and working with the planner. They're going to it's going to be up to the board, but the planner is ready to ask them to close the public hearing, and she'll have a draft decision for them to consider. If we sort of work on the same time frame in January, hopefully we'll be there. If we know that by January 31st, you're not going to be able to render a decision, yes, we're going to be open to extending it into February. whether it has to be all the way to the end of February, we can figure it out, but, you know, as we've always said, you know, as long as we're making good progress, if we need another meeting to get it into the end zone, I think, Leggett is open to that. Bill, do you feel otherwise?
Agreed.
Well, I'm happy to work on draft recommendations. We don't have a planner, so we're at a disadvantage to getting a lot of that work done. I will do the best I can to put a draft together so that we have that to look at for January. However, I don't anticipate being able to, and you know, that I think is, you know, I'll do the best I can to get that together.
Can I ask a question?
You know, yeah, go ahead.
What's the extension process?
I have to, we, as a board, would need to request formally, and then it needs to be put in writing.
From?
And it has to be agreed to by both parties.
And so they request us to put something in writing, and we request something from?
It's in the, no, the way it's written in the bylaw is either party can request the extension. I would have to submit a letter
To who?
to
To
Mr.
Leggett,
Goss,
yeah.
to Leggett, and they would have to agree and write back, and we'd have to have essentially both parties need to agree in writing, that's all there is to it.
So at that meeting, couldn't we just do it live? Am I missing something?
Yeah.
We don't have to debate it tonight, right?
We're not debating it, I just
Okay.
want to clear up where we're at. I want to make sure that it's perfectly clear so that I can set the expectation, and
Can I ask that, is it really January 31st that we run out of time? Is that the day? Do we know?
well, technically, it would be the 14th, that was our first meeting, so our first meeting was September 14th. I think you
Okay.
filed like a week after, something like that, or maybe it was something, anyway, yeah, you filed on the 19th.
I guess I
So
was.
we kind of lost a whole month, because our planning board meeting was the 14th. You guys filed like, 7 or 8 days later. So literally, we lost September.
Got it.
Then our zoning wasn't passed, so we couldn't deliberate in any meetings.
Yeah.
So we lost all that time, even though we could look at stuff and we could review plans, we did not have the opportunity to deliberate. Zoning didn't get cleared by the AG until November. So that lost more time, and now we're up against the holiday. So I feel like we've been at a disadvantage. And, the planner issue I already brought up, so that's,
But it sounds like, all that being said, if we get to our January meeting and we're not prepared to render the final decision that night, everyone is essentially in agreement that if we need to extend to get to the February meeting in order to get it done.
But do I need something in writing that night? Because that's what the bylaw says.
Or there must be a
So-
form, right?
Pardon me?
The ZBA does it all the time, right on site, right?
They do?
So I
Yeah,
assume,
it will,
I assume that somebody with the authority to sign would be present.
Okay, I just want that reassurance, and then I'm fine with it.
Okay.
I can bring we have a request for continuation form that's very routine, and I
I
can
don't
bring
think
it.
that's, I don't know if it's quite the same. I thought it was a little more formal, but I'm fine with
We
doing
have,
it
yeah,
that
we
way.
have a request for extension too, and I can bring that, and both parties can sign right here at the
Okay.
meeting.
If it's
that's
only
fine
for
with
us
me.
to decide, we could do it then, and then, God forbid, we have to do it again, and we could do it again, like we don't need to, like.
Just to
figure out
confirm, the date of the January meeting is the 9th, right? That's what I have down in the calendar.
That's the other issue. I mean,
Is-
first of all, I don't think I'm back at that point, but, so I don't know when all this is gonna happen, but,
Unless you wanted to change the day of
I
the
could
week,
change the
because
date.
the following Monday is Martin Luther
The
King
Martin
Day.
thing is the 16th, yeah.
so unless you wanna push it to later, which we can do, I mean, what's that?
I think the question then becomes, and just to be efficient, like, where is the time best used? Is it best used not meeting again between now and January 23rd? Because then it shortens the time we have between January 23rd and our February meeting.
Well, I could always push it to the 17th. It doesn't have to be a Monday night.
Sure.
Yeah, that's fine.
Just keep in mind that the zoning board meeting is likely going to be the 17th.
What, really?
Yeah, it's usually the third Tuesday of every month.
Third Tuesday? I thought they were
Mhm.
on
We changed it from the 4th so as to not conflict with Marblehead.
All right, well, that's just gonna be what it is then for that. You know, I don't have a lot of wiggle room here. Unless you wanna go to the 23rd, which is an option.
How about the 18th?
That's, 18th? That's available for me. I don't know what the board,
I'm not gonna be here, but feel free to continue without me. I think I have another meeting,
but you're not here that week.
just that night.
Okay, just that night, okay.
Yep.
As far as I know, it's okay.
I'd rather have the whole board together, but
It's open for me.
If it's something that doesn't have to be, if we could set a tentative date, I might be able to, the zoning board is pretty flexible, I might be able to shift them to the 18th. I've had them on
that would be,
Wednesdays before.
if you could do that, I would appreciate it. Then that would let us get mid-month
It
with
seems
this
like
meeting.
we'd want that time, we wouldn't want to delay to the 23rd and shorten the amount of time for, because it sounds like that's when the final work is going to get done, is in between.
Well, then,
January
the
and
other thing
February.
is, if we can hit that 17th date, then if we need to extend, then it doesn't have to be a full month. I mean, maybe we do you know, we can have an early February meeting. I'm just trying to,
Yeah.
you know, be reasonable here and try to, you know, I'm not trying to, you know, jam up the whole process, but I'm just being realistic about what can be accomplished.
I agree.
Yeah.
So, did we all say the 17th was a possibility?
17th or 18th?
17th.
17th, that's a
Yeah.
Tuesday.
That's fine.
Tuesday.
Yeah.
Yeah, just so my client knows, I'm in Middleborough that
Yeah,
night.
no,
and
Paul,
you're
that's
around.
fine. I totally agree.
Yeah.
So does the 17th work for you guys? Okay. So would you want to, do you want to, I don't know that we need to vote. We can agree to move the meeting to the 17th of January. Yes?
Worst case scenario, Marzi and I will divide and conquer, so.
Okay, so would you please do that for me? Change the date of
Sure.
our January meeting to the 17th?
Absolutely,
Thank
yeah.
you. Okay, so that might help a little bit too, okay? All right, other than that, so in closing, what I'm gonna do is just, I took quite a few notes. I'm gonna make sure I get comments from the other people I need comments from. I will go through this tape, summarize all of everything we discussed tonight. We'll put together some findings and some preliminary, you know, draft information and get that out to everybody before January 17th. How does that sound?
Sounds good.
Okay, so, anything else then? If there's nothing else to discuss right now, we can adjourn.
We have to vote to continue to the 17th.
We have to vote to continue, that's exactly right. Thank you, Paul. Thank gosh, we have a lawyer. We actually have a few. All right, so motion to continue this meeting, this hearing until the 17th of January.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, so moved. Now we can have a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Thank you all
Thank you.
very
Thanks,
much.
everyone. Appreciate it.
Thanks, everyone.